My name is John Spruce. Welcome to our meetup. We've got Jesse Fewell with us today. He's going to be talking about Untapped Agility. He's a world-renowned coach and trainer, and now author as well. He has got certificates as long as my arm, and he's been in the business a long, long time. You've got some great insights to share today. He's got a book out at the moment called Untapped Agility. As part of the, there it is. Thank you, Jesse. As part of the normal running of these things, any questions, by all means, drop into the chat. There'll be a little bit of time at the end of the session to answer any questions as you go. Jesse's got a presentation and some stuff to go through as well. But without further ado, I will hand over to Jesse to crack on. Any questions or problems, please put me into the chat. Jesse, over to you.
Thank you so much, John. I am super excited to be here today to meet the gang, to meet the crew. I've been working on this topic for almost 3 years, give or take, depending on what title it's had over the course of time. And over the course of those few years, it somehow turned into a book. And that in itself is its own story. But I'm just continuing to have the opportunity, the privilege to just share a couple of really important ideas about this agile journey, this idea of going from the way things have always been to the way things totally could be, this aspirational journey of doing the best work of our lives. And I've got one key point, one key thought, one key idea, which is this. Your transition, your transformation, your journey to agility is not a failure. It has only just begun. So if you're on this meetup, if you're in this session today, you're probably curious, interested, passionate even, championing this idea of agile ways of working, lean ways of working, more collaboration, more creativity, more streamlined, more customer-oriented, where we're switching from the evil waterfall to more continuous delivery, switching from a project mindset to a product mindset. And it can get frustrating. It can get exhausting because we're surrounded by hundreds of years of management tradition that we've inherited, almost the way we've inherited original sin. It's just the original approach to management that emerged hundreds, thousands of years ago. Some people date the current concept of an org structure all the way to Julius Caesar. And it's frustrating when people are just stuck on that and they're not moving forward. Can't they see? Isn't it obvious? And why are they doing it wrong? And why don't we have leadership support for things that improve the bottom line? Don't they see? It can be really frustrating. And all I have to share, but there's one key point. If you take nothing else away, it's not your fault. It's not even their fault. It's just hard. And it is a long journey. And those of us who have been doing this for a few years, sometimes it can be easy to forget what it was like to be at the beginning of the journey because we are where we are today. We're not where we were back then. And it can be frustrating that we're working with people who are at the stage of their journey that we were at when we began. So a little bit of encouragement just to get us started, that it's not a failure if teams are still doing things the wrong way, if practitioners are still asking the same questions over and over again. And I've seen it a lot. I've seen it in a number of countries and different industries. And I've had the chance to work with a variety of associations, including the Agile Alliance, the Scrum Alliance, the Project Management Institute, in helping spread this message of agility to the broader market, the broader industry. And there are patterns. There are patterns that appear over and over and over again. I've lived and worked abroad and discovered at the end of the day, people are people, no matter what industry you're in, no matter what country you're from or living in or working in. And so today I want to share with you some thoughts. I want to share with you an opening story. We're going to get into something you may have heard before. And then we're going to see how that story points to a broader pattern. That pattern involves barriers to agility, barriers to collaboration, barriers to delivery. And then we'll take a look at 2 specific rebound moves to help overcome those barriers. And then finally, we'll share with you some free resources that are available at the website. You'll get a chance to check out how you might be able to take advantage of some of these ideas and concepts right away. So let's start with a story. Well, actually, before I start with the story, another key point, we're talking about leadership, but that doesn't mean you have to have a title to have an impact. You don't have to have a fancy position. These frustrations and this path to agility is championed by people at all levels of the organization. Maybe you're like Ted, the team lead, who doesn't have a fancy position, but you're looked up to as an agile champion, as someone who has expertise in this, someone who's done it. Maybe you're more like Maria, the manager, where you do have direct reports, subordinates, and a budget. And you're not held accountable for tactical excellence as much as strategic results. Hit this date, achieve these goals. Or maybe you are working readily with Emmett the executive, who's the agile executive sponsor, someone who was brought in from the outside to shake things up. And Emmett the executive comes to you and says, hey, I'm a leader of leaders, and I'm looking at you to help define what our agile strategy is going to be. How do we get there? Who do we need to bring on board? How should we spend our budget on this? And so what you'll notice as we go through this story is that everyone at every level who champions these new ways of working run into the same frustrations, and they have the same opportunities for impact and influence. So that's one of the I think, most exciting and encouraging things about it is this is not limited to people at the executive level. So here's a story. Once upon a time, there was a media company in the United States. And this media company was actually founded by a group of Aussies. And they had a CEO who was hired explicitly to bring in some fresh new ideas. And for a couple of years, it was amazing. Unparalleled, unprecedented, creative explosion. Lots of technology was rolled out, an award-winning mobile app, and new footage, new ideas of like a TV series, and even some breakthrough kind of virtual digital footage. Lots of publications, creative explosion. And all it did was burn the company out. Because at the staff level, if I was working on this project, 2 weeks later, I got pulled onto a fresh new project before we really even get started the other one. And then when I was working on that one, quick, we need to hire some new people. Let's quick hire a new graphic artist, hire a photographer, hire a videographer. We need more people. And the people they were hiring were in higher demand, so they had to pay them more than their supervisors and their managers. And so there was an imbalance in compensation, in head count, in org structure, and there was just a lot of misalignment on which project when I'm working over here, and there was a lot of technical debt in the tech side because we kept doing stuff without investing in any core technology. It was just a mess, but it was a lot of creativity. And so eventually the ownership had had enough. And they said, you know what, we hired a really creative CEO, but too much of a good thing is not helping. So the CEO resigned, and they asked this transformation consultant, his name is Luis, and they said, hey, Luis, we need you to turn this around. We need you to stabilize this firm. We need you to start finding ways to generate revenue from all this creative ideas. We need a way for you to heal our culture. We need a way for you to fix our technology. And you look at the backlog of problems, and it was boom, boom. It was just overwhelming, all the problems that came up. And so, the conventional strategy would be fix them all. But he said, no. Here was the idea. He said, I can't use the same strategy, do everything, that my predecessor used. Because if I do, it'll only reinforce the same cultural problems, the same fragmentation, the same burnout. So he said, I'm only going to choose the high value, low effort transformation topics. So what does that mean? Well, he installed a few agile practices to get teams collaborating. He installed one new technology, a content management system. And then he said, that's all we're going to do for right now. We're not going to fix this problem. And a few people were just super frustrated that he wouldn't fix everything right away. And so they left. And he replaced some of those roles over time. And he waited for the right person to fill a new visionary role so we could have a coherent vision of where we're going instead of creative ideas. And over the course of a year and a half, 2 years, things started to heal. He took time. And he took time because he triaged. He chose what to transform and what not to transform, rather than transforming everything. And this was the exact opposite strategy, philosophy for modernizing the company relative to his previous predecessor. So it's fascinating because it reveals a contrast. So initially, maybe Ted the team lead, or Maria the manager, or Emmett the executive, we have to seize opportunities. It's not often where we get budget. It's not often where we get access to that talented engineer over there, or that super creative artist over there. We got to seize the opportunity while we have. And it's a really good move. It's a really good strategic idea to take advantage of those opportunities. Until you discover you're overcommitted. You're always behind. There's too much work. Oh my goodness. I tried to fix this while I was there, and now I've got like 3 different assignments. And then, we keep jumping on to more features because the customer wants more features or more projects, and and we keep slipping dates and hitting credibility. It was too much of a good thing. What do we do? Well, the answer for Luis was to say no. Master the art of no. And that's the way we can overcome this barrier of always being behind and never being on time, is we've got to stop over committing to more delivery, more responsibility, more transformation. When it comes to all of the requests that are being put on our departments, on our teams, or on our own plate, the key to success is to say no more often than we do today. It's always easy to say, yes, I will do more work for you. Please don't sack me. Please don't fire me. I will do more work. Yes, absolutely. We will. Yes, that's easy, because saying no, that's difficult, isn't it? But when it comes to success, we as professionals shouldn't be involved in every decision that's being made in our areas, in our departments. We shouldn't be committing to delivering everything that could possibly be delivered or transforming everything at once. We're just going to overcommit and always be behind. Well, then, Jesse, how do we decide? How do we decide where to put our agile efforts? Well, this is graphic, is the innovation ambition matrix. It was popularized in the Harvard Business Review several years ago. And here, it shows a distinct set of arenas or areas based on what we know. And so what we know where to play and how to win. That's our core business as a business unit. It's our core value proposition as a department. And we have these stakeholders, and we have these deliverables that we always produce and relied upon. If we wanted a little bit more value to expand beyond our core, that would be an adjacent area, and there's more unknown there. So we probably need a little bit more agility as we venture into either a new set of deliverables, a new set of offerings, or a new market, or a new set of stakeholders. But then if you want to be totally disruptive, totally digital, innovative, well, then you're going to go out into the crazy transformational sector where we need even more agility to conquer even more unknowns and uncertainty. But conversely, if you're still doing business as usual, standard operating procedure, you probably don't need a lot of agility. Don't put your agile efforts into what you do day to day to day to day to day. The most agility we need is where the most unknowns are. Likewise, this is a grid that's kind of like an unholy mashup of two different change or contextual models, the Stacy metrics and the Kinefin framework. And if you were to graph out uncertainty based on what we're doing and how we're doing it, the least amount of unknowns, the most amount of certainty and confidence would be in day-to-day operations, where it's obvious how we do this stuff. There's a standard operating procedure, there's business as usual. We just simply categorize the incoming request and we respond accordingly. As we start venturing in to the other extreme, however, the other extreme where it's nothing but chaos, nothing but unknowns and uncertainty, and everything's changing all the time. Maybe in military combat, where no plan survives first contact with the enemy is a famous quote in the military sciences. And there, we don't have a standard operating procedure in a lot of these things. We're just figuring it out, like a coronavirus response. I mean, we've never dealt with a global pandemic like this ever before. And so we just act. We don't have time to sit around. Let's have a daily stand-up today to determine which patient who's currently no longer having a heartbeat should be resuscitated. 4 patients right now that do not have a heartbeat right now. Susan, would you care to volunteer? No, we don't have time. We have to act. So in these two scenarios, in the day-to-day, simple, known area, we don't need a lot of agility. There's not a lot of unknown and risk. And in the extreme chaos, crazy land, I mean, yes, it's nothing but response. It's nothing but action. So agile methods, maybe they don't add a lot of value there either. It's the messy middle. The messy middle where we need this combination of some structure, some kind of stability, but then also adaptability, whether it's a complicated project or a complex project where there's a lot more uncertainty and we need to probe versus a complicated project where we do some analysis and then make assumptions that are wrong. And agile transformation is most needed in the messy middle. So no, we don't need agile everywhere. Do not transform everything all at once. If you do, I guarantee you'll end up like Luis's predecessor, where everyone's burned out, confused, angry, especially angry at the agile person. Instead, we need to be very targeted and selective about where we begin this journey and where we start inviting other people into the journey. And that is the pattern for mastering no. Mastering the art of no. And it's just one of 7 patterns in the Untapped Agility lexicon, the Untapped Agility library consisting of 1 book. And it's simply this, that in the beginning, when we venture on a change initiative, there's a boost to be made with a conventional change management strategy. And whether it's taking initiative, whether it's mobilizing other people, there's good things to do. Eventually, there's gonna be a barrier. There always is. And the way to move forward to the next level of momentum is to lean against the logic of the boost and rebound to an untapped territory. Well, what are those barriers, Jesse? I mean, you couldn't possibly predict what you might run into, so we should still move forward, right? Yes, we should still move forward. And if you were to ask these surveys that were done by various industry associations and organizations over the last 2 to 3 years, a cross section, whether it's lean startup, whether it's DevOps, whether it's the Scrum Alliance or the State of Agile report, We took a look at them and we wanted to see, is there some cross patterns happening across these organizations, across these data sets, these populations? Is there anything coming up consistently in the way of agility that we should anticipate? And the answer is yes. Number one, most common barrier is our culture and our structure. The organization is its own barrier to agility, which kind of makes sense, right? Like the reason we're not as adaptive and innovative and collaborative as we could be is because we're not adaptive, we're not innovative, we're not collaborative. The organization is its own impediment. What's interesting is that we're also seeing that, oh, we don't have enough resource, we don't have enough budget, we don't have enough headcount, we don't have enough infrastructure, we don't have enough training, we don't have enough expertise. If only we had more, we could do more. Inadequate leadership support showed up in 4 of the 6 surveys that we looked at. And that comes up over and over. Like, I wish I had air cover. I wish I had some leadership telling the story and leveraging their influence to remove barriers. And so there's a series of these patterns that come up over and over and over again. And we extracted from those patterns a few key examples. Not having enough buy-in, which usually is around the general resistance to change, or a limited impact, which is around usually an inadequate leadership support. Always behind. We don't have enough resources. And so we want to explore how some of these barriers show up and what the rebound move around some of these barriers would be. So what's interesting about this, before we move on, is that we know what the problem points are in every transformation. According to the data, we already know what your greatest pain points as a change champion are going to be. We already know them. So it's just a matter of being prepared for the general resistance to change, the being overcommitted and always behind, snapping back to old habits, and another one, you're gonna receive unfair criticism about your agile progress. These things come up over and over and over again. So another bit of good news, you are not alone. You are not alone in this journey. Other people have experienced these barriers. So let's talk about 2 more, because we've just covered the leadership, the rebound move, master the art of no. And we've got time to cover 2 more within the hour. And the next one we want to talk about is throw the textbook away. That's right. If you want more agility, you need to throw the Agile textbook away. Let's look at another story. Mike was the transformation lead at a publishing company, and he was hired to be the head of agility for this company after his predecessor was invited to leave. And this guy was just really myopic, singularly focused. He had his methodology. He wanted to roll it out, and he couldn't get anybody on board. He didn't listen very well, and then he was into that scaled agile framework. That was the problem. It was the methodology he chose. Well, Mike showed up, and he noticed, for all of the criticism, his predecessor made some good progress. That scaled agile framework gave him enough of a platform to drive multi-skilled cross-functional teams. We were now having more collaboration at the team level than we've ever had before. Okay, that's interesting. Also, the entire technology group was aligned to a 2-week cadence. Boom, boom, boom. So now that simplified planning. It really helped people wrap their heads around schedules. Okay, 2-week iterations. Sounds pretty good. And they'd flattened the organization and removed a lot of manager positions and repositioned those managers into different kinds of roles, whether they were advisory roles or technical contributor roles. So he was really impressed, and he just waited to see, like, what the day-to-day looks like, as he was observing, what he noticed was that they had hit a block, they'd hit a plateau. There was only a certain, they had some of these practices in place, but they weren't getting a lot of the really good collaboration because of the Scrum Masters, who said, no, you can't talk to me, or rather, you can't talk to my team unless you talk to me. I'm the Scrum Master. My job is to shield the team from everyone else. No. You can't change the format of the daily stand-up meeting. The daily stand-up meeting must consist of the official 3 questions. And if you don't do that, you're not compliant. No. If you don't have these artifacts, then you're not using the framework properly. And so these Agile champions, Scrum Masters, were getting in the way of improvement, because a lot of the improvements meant breaking the framework that they were asked to champion. Likewise, you're not allowed to talk to the business. You can only talk to the product owner. And do not let any of the business people who are actually consuming your products talk to you about what they would like. No. They're only permitted to talk to product owners. Became a bottleneck. And so there was this hang up around the job titles, the product owner and the Scrum Master, that was introduced with this framework. And so it was a real challenge. How do we foster more collaboration? How do we foster more improvement? And so he decided to take away everybody's title. No more Scrum Master title. No more product owner title. And everyone flipped out. Oh my gosh, that's just not Agile. You're not Agile unless you do it this way. And that's not what my trainer said. And that's not what the textbook said. And that's not what the conference keynote man said. No, what am I even supposed to do? Well, here's an idea. Self-organize or talk to people about where you could add the most value. And so by removing this baggage of Agile says this, by removing that baggage, it opened up a whole new world of opportunity and possibility to get to the next level of collaboration, the next level of improvement. And so that was Mike's story. And it turns out he's not the only one. So maybe Ted, the team lead, really likes his BDD, given, when, then, gherkin format. And maybe Maria, the manager, really likes that Kanban task board. And Emmett, the executive, lead startup. And he's like, we need funding review boards right away. And so they're implementing best practices. This is a really good move. It makes a ton of sense. You're injecting new concepts, new structure, new ways of thinking about work. You're injecting that into the status quo. It's truly disruptive and it truly moves the conversation forward. Only so far, because eventually they're doing it wrong. These user stories are totally the wrong kind of user stories. And these acceptance criteria, those task boards, I set up these common boards and they're just not using them the right way. It's turning into a complaint board. And that's not what it's meant to be. It's meant to be flow and limit our work in progress. And Emmett, the executive, is just like, we're going these funding review boards and we're not changing the way we make decisions. Don't they know we're supposed to kill projects that don't have momentum? Don't they know that we're supposed to only invest in the projects that do have momentum? They're doing it all wrong. And so the answer, it might be not to beat people over the head about how bad they are at Agile, or beat people over the head about how uncompliant they are, but instead to change the game and throw the textbook away. Now you'll notice you can only throw the textbook away after you've mastered it or after you've studied it. I made the mistake of making this point to a group of undergraduates at the US Military Academy whose full-time job is to study the textbook. They're not ready yet necessarily to dispense with some basic fundamentals of leadership, some basic fundamentals of teamwork. So don't mistake the rebound as a shortcut. It's not. It's one thing to keep, it's something to keep in mind, that how much of the textbook do we want to put into place and to where it becomes its own limiting factor. And how much of that do we want to start kind of sidestepping because we've maxed out the amount of value that we can. Let me give you a couple of thoughts and some examples about this, because we want to reconcile best practices with reality. The best practices we've learned, like short iterations and cross-functional teams, and my all-time favorite, story points. Yeah, if you're pointing, then you're totally agile. How do we reconcile that with, like, shouldn't we just do all those things? Well, too many times, the book that you read, maybe even Jesse's book sometimes, the workshop you went to, or the coach that you hired is telling you to do something when we've forgotten about the concept of growth and the concept of context. We'll start with growth. If you read the textbook, if you read the official Scrum guide, or the official Scaled Agile Framework website, or the official Kanban book, if you read all of that stuff, there's a specification. And much like an auto manufacturer here at Honda would put together the user's guide. This is how you use this innovative product. And you use the turn signals this way, and then the steering wheel this way, and then you get a brand new user who doesn't understand all of these technical intricacies, who's a teenager, who's learning how to drive for the first time. Oh my God, not really thinking about moving from third gear into second gear, or moving the headlights from this setting. Not thinking about that, just thinking about, how do I not die right now? I have a 15-year-old son who this week is going to take his automobile driving test. And there is a little bit that he needs to remember about the textbook. That's a foundational knowledge. Once he starts operating the vehicle with supervision, he's not going to be thinking about a lot of those things. He's going to be thinking about safety. How do I just stay safe? Usually, when we talk about some kind of a management trajectory, we also, some management initiative, we sometimes also forget about growth. This is an example of the hockey stick chart. The hockey stick chart, you can see here that the red curve looks like a hockey stick, because that's what leaders expect. That's what change advocates expect, that if we introduce this best practice, performance will go up. If we introduce this textbook approach, then profits will go up, productivity will go up, quality will go up. But much like we forgot about the reality of people wanting to survive, well, here's the reality, that things get worse before they get better. It's called the J curve. And the J curve is a phenomenon in human experience. It shows up again and again and again. It shows up in finance, where in order to make money, you first need to spend money. So your overall net value goes down. In order to make progress on yourself as a person, you first need to admit your problems. So things get uglier before they get better. Even in nation building, there's a book called The J Curve about that one particular version of it, which is that as we start introducing more democracy, then stability goes down. That dictatorship now suddenly has more democracy, and we're seeing it play out right now in Belarus. But there's a lot more instability as we start seeing more pushing for democracy, and it's only over time where more democracy yields more stability. So this J curve, it shows up in finance, shows up in sociology, shows up in psychology, and it also shows up in change. Psychologist Virginia Satir applied this concept to the introduction of a new stimulus into the status quo. Immediately, the status quo, performance goes down, confidence goes down, clarity goes down. You just introduced Agile. Everyone's confused. We're super confused. Things get worse before they get better. That's the concept of growth. Put another way, new Agile practices must be done poorly before they are done properly. User stories must be poor before they are proper. Story points must be poor before they are proper. If any of you have been trying to make sure that your deliverables are done in regular sprints or intervals of 2 to 4 weeks, and no matter how hard they try, they keep slipping, it's not fully finished, it's not fully done, does not meet the definition of done, well, they're still learning, still growing, still figuring it out. New practices must be done poorly before they are done well. And then there's this question of whether your practice is fit for purpose in your current context. I like this caterpillar here on the tree. I can't wait to see what butterfly he turns into. And he's looking at a very large caterpillar in the way of a boa constrictor. Not going to turn into a butterfly. It's a different context. It's a different situation. And so too many times, we as change champions, as agile champions, we're too often like the caterpillar. We just assume that their journey is going to be just like our journey. When actually, the textbook practices that we used are going to look a lot different for the people that we're helping today than the way they were for us a long time ago. So the question is, how do we do this? How do we adjust our practices? How do we throw the textbook away without throwing everything we believe in? How do we, because if you change it, it's going to break, right? So I'd like to share with you this 3P Agile tailoring rubric. It's a simple conversation tool that you can have with your teams to ask, what is the pain? Number one, what is the pain associated with this technique, this practice, this process, or this technology? What's driving us crazy with it right now? Because apparently, if you listen to the conventional advice, behavior-driven development is supposed to fix everything. DevOps is supposed to fix everything. Continuous delivery should fix everything. And it's just not, it's super painful. Why? And then once we figure that out, we can ask, well, what was the original purpose of that technique, process, or practice? And then number three, how might we capture some of that purpose, just a little bit of it, with a little bit of a pivot, a little bit of an adjustment, a tweak? I'll give you an example. So this idea of face-to-face conversation, face-to-face communication on a global team. And so you have a lot of people saying that, especially now, everyone work from home and different things, we have to have video chats. We have to have, we wish we could have more meetings because we have 14-hour time zones. And there's a lot of people that are on our teams that are speaking a global version of English that my dialect is difficult to understand and it's not their first language. So it's challenging. I wish we could just dispense with all of these daily meetings are really painful. I woke up this morning at 5 a.m. in order to make a daily stand-up that covered multiple time zones. It's real. So then you can start asking, well, what was the original point of this face-to-face conversation technique, this principle that we've been told? Well, the idea is to improve communication, because if it's only verbal communication, then we miss out on the nonverbals, like body language and facial expression. Not only that, but it also allows us to do better team building because I can see you and I have a human connection with you. And so, okay, so we have this pain of getting all of us on the same call, video cameras, or it's 5 a.m. I don't look good. I just don't. So then how do we improve? This? Well, maybe we don't turn on the videos at 5 a.m., but we do find a way to have some extra channels through Slack or WhatsApp or some other way where we can keep the conversation going in a textual way. And I could use Google Translate. Worked with one team in China where the team strongly preferred written communication that they could run through Google Translate and then reply back with confidence. So we needed to add that channel. And while you're at it, maybe in that channel, share how your weekend went and make a joke. Today on that global stand-up meeting I was on, there was somebody said, okay, who's going to start our daily stand-up with a joke? And somebody said, well, not me, because I use funny phrases that you don't understand. And somebody, well, what do you mean? Well, you know, like I don't know. I'm an American, so I don't put my luggage into my automobile's boot. I put it into my trunk. And then people said, well, okay, like your front or your back? And then everyone started laughing at each other because your English is different than my English. And it was funny. It was fun. And it was all without any video screens. And so this is a way where this team found a way to pivot a technique to meet the pain that they're in and still achieve some of the purpose. So now it's time for you to think about this. Just a quick second. What about your practices, techniques, frameworks on your team? Is there one that comes to mind that's very frustrating and it's not working, that they're doing wrong? Maybe it's user stories that are actually really just specifications. Is there something that comes to mind? If you were to share in the chat window a couple of those thoughts, you might notice you're not the only one who is struggling with some of these techniques. And so that's whether it's maybe it's the fact that having to write automated tests doubles the amount of code that you have to write. That's so frustrating. It's so annoying. Now, for every line, I have to write another line of code. Oh, okay. Okay, so it's frustrating. And so what are some things that your teams are complaining about? It might be another way to ask this. And if you think about, and so for every complaint that people are giving you about this Agile practice technique or something like that. So Femi is talking about user stories turning into good old requirements documents. There's a way for you to acknowledge that pain and then talk about the purpose of that technique and then encourage a pivot. All right, we got time for one more. That was throwing the textbook away. We mastered the art of no. We got time for one more, and then we'll open up for some questions. And the next one is about give the transformation away. Give away Agile. Let go of control of it. Let it go. Let me tell you what I mean. It's kind of a funny story. So Randy was hired as a consultant to go help introduce some agility at a large manufacturing company. And he was super excited. This was a big pilot. It was the first time the PM would have been involved in Agile. And he invited one of the IT managers to come in and be a part of this conversation because this pilot project involved PMO, IT, business operations. And so during the kickoff workshop, the IT manager said, I appreciate what you're doing, Randy. I appreciate the workshop and for the benefit of the PMO over there. But we've been using Agile methods for 5 years. We're operating on 2-week sprints. We have a fully refined backlog, and we've got automation at the test and feature level. We've got product owners and scrum masters fully in place. It's super mature. In fact, I just keynoted at the local meetup about our Agile transformation. He said, "That's fantastic. That's amazing. If you're deploying and delivering every couple of weeks, then certainly we'll be able to make really good progress on this pilot. How long do you think it's going to take this pilot to get out the door?" And he said, "A bit of it, 1 year." What? And the manager said, "Yeah, because we're responsible for our Agile. And our Agile is perfect. It's excellent. It's awesome. But we only get to work on it after all the upstream documentation has been prepared. And then once we're done with our stuff, then we send it over to the downstream quality, security, and the operations people." He said, "What? Well, what? How about you involve the PMO and involve some of those ops people in this pilot so that we can take that 1 year and turn it into something less than that?" And they said, No. Because if we involve the PMO, they're going to change it. If we involve the quality people, they're going to change it. If we involve all of the portfolio people, they're going to change how we do our Agile. And we love the way we work in our silo by ourselves with all the Agile that you could ever want and no agility. And so the idea that started percolating around was, you know what, it's time for you to give away all of that awesomeness and excellence, even if it means people are going to have to change the way that you do your Agile to improve the broader picture, the bigger picture. So here's usually the way it happens. You take initiative. No one's going to jump on this Agile train unless you jump on it first. You have the expertise, and you have enough influence, whether Ted the team lead or Marie the manager, and you're just going to start moving forward with your Agile pilots. You've got to be role models for new ways of working. It's the right choice, and it only gets you so far by yourself. Because now you could do so much more. You could do so much more if only those people were on board. And now all these dependencies are slowing us down. We spent all this money and all this time on coaches and consultants and trainers. Where's our agility? I see a lot of new practices, but I don't see outcomes at the bottom line level. So it might be because it's time to give it away. It's time to invite other people to the table who will completely upend, who will turn your Agile upside down and make it look ugly, different, and not what you wanted, and not what you've enjoyed for the last few years as you go about having a broader organizational impact. Couple of things. So here's the storyline. The storyline we've been told. You start off today, waterfall, all the requirements, all the design, all the build, all the test, all the launch. Oh my goodness, we're coming up to the deadline. What do we do? We got to cut some testing and get the deadline. A lot of stress. You only get something when you get everything. And then let's start on our journey. We're going to go to incremental delivery, where we've got milestone 1, release 1, a little bit of requirements, design, build, test, a little bit more design, build, test, a little bit more, oh man, we're still stressed on that project deadline, except increment 1 and increment 2 are done. They're done. They fully defined done. Incremental delivery, it's fantastic. And once we get there, then we'll mature. We'll then get to this super agile continuous delivery where we do a little bit of the requirements and we just iterate it all together and everything's just pushing. It's super awesome. This is what we're told. This is what we believe is an agile journey. Except it goes more like this. This is called water scrum fall, where only one department got the agile memo. And you do all the requirements, all the design, build, all the test and all the launch. How long does it take to change? How long does it take to deliver? Same as always. But eventually, that design manager hears about the agile, hears about how happy all those build people are. And that design manager says, I want me some agile. And the requirements person says, ooh, yeah, that looks pretty good too. So the requirements manager says, we want some agile too. And then the test manager says, oh, me too. And so the requirements manager rolls out lean startup. The design manager rolls out design thinking. The test manager rolls out DevOps. And it still takes a year to get anything done. Because we're all really obsessed about getting our department as agile as our department can be, and we're missing the bigger picture. So how many times have you been talking about practices and talking about teams and whatnot, and your coach says, yeah, good job, guys. You've been sprinting and piloting, and you've been got scrum mastering, and you've been user storying, and the reality is you're not there, you're here. You're not in the agile tropical awesomeness. You're an oasis of awesome in a massive desert. And we have a lot of work to do, a lot of work. Now, and for us to take our oasis of awesome, it's time for us to sprinkle some of that out to the rest of the organization, even if it means we start getting a lot of the attention that we don't want. So here's what that looks like. The State of DevOps report last year was fascinating because it told a story of what the data says correlates to transformation success. And it says that you want your transformation to be more organic than organized. What that means is you don't roll out a monolithic playbook, a single methodology for the entire department, the entire business unit. If you do that, you correlate to mediocrity. Instead, an organic approach is one where teams are learning from each other, and they're tailoring their practices to their particular team, their particular responsibility set. Likewise, the centers of excellence tend to take all the Agile talent and put them in an ivory tower instead of deploying those best talented, most experienced experts to the place where the work is happening. A better approach would be communities of practice, where we still have lunch and learns, where we still trade practices, where we still help each other learn this stuff, but we do it more informally, instead of centralizing it such that there's only one way to do things, only one person to contact, and that person becomes a bottleneck. Now, that doesn't mean that everything is just accidental and incidental. Because one of the things that they found in the research was that if the only thing you do in your transformation is to make your pilots succeed, then you're way better off than having those pilots fizzle out. And so we need to deploy as much energy and as much attention and as much support as we can to those pilots and get them successful with intent. So, so that's one of the fascinating things here, is that if you want your transformation to scale, if you want the impact of agility to scale, it's time for us to kind of give away control over it, because the next level of agility will not come from us. It's not going to come from the coaches. It's not going to come from the scrum masters. It's going to come from them. It's not going to come from the trainers. It's not even going to come from Jesse. It's going to come from the people who are doing the work, because they know what they're running into. They know what assets they have. And this is very unsettling. It's very frightening for those of us who build literally our entire careers around this agility thing, because now we're confronted with the reality that in order to have a massive impact, I need to mobilize everyone else to do things that I can't do, and even maybe to do it the way I wouldn't do it. Former US President Harry Truman, great quote here: "It's amazing what you can accomplish if you do not care who gets the credit." So is it really about agility, or is it more about your agility? Those are the 3 rebound moves we had time for today. There's 7 of them, 7 patterns to overcome 7 barriers. And if you want to check out more of them, go to the website, untappedagility.com. That's the website where I promised you the free digital bonuses, where you can click on them and download them right away. Things like a report on all of those Agile barriers, and templates for that tailoring process, and a number of other cool downloads. And at this point, I think, John, we're going to hand it over to you to talk some questions. I think we got some time, a little bit of time for some questions.
Yeah, we have about 5 minutes or so for some questions. We had a few pop in. I'll just go from top to bottom, but I think we might need to do some rapid fire on this one to give people back their evening. So I'll start off with Visit. Now I remember why Jesse looks and sounds familiar. He's from the Scrum Alliance Path to Coaching videos. His question says, if you remove roles and positions which are part of a company structure, wouldn't people try to reintroduce these just to make sense of it? And then would you end up with something weird like Agile Master or Backlog Boss?
Yeah, so with the role descriptions, one of the things, it was an intentional experiment to overcome a specific problem, which was baggage and dogma. And by removing that, it revealed that we had some bigger issues to talk about, which is, how do we want to collaborate? And how do we design our roles with more collaboration in mind? So no, you don't necessarily want to introduce a level of chaos into the conversation. You do want to have a structured conversation around it, but you don't want to be tied down to the dogma. You don't want to be tied down to the textbook. So yes, some people might try to reintroduce the same things in order to make sense of it. So in Mike's case, they were project managers, and they fundamentally redefined the term project manager now to include collaboration, to include adaptation and empowerment. And so it was a way that they did have an anchor, but it had now completely changed to a different kind of thing. So it's a good question. And the answer, I think, really is much more nuanced. Don't replace dogma with chaos. Replace dogma with dialogue.
Nice. That's quite a good one. Replace dogma with dialogue. I like that as a takeaway. We have another one from Jennifer. I completely agree that frameworks should be adapted and not too rigid. What do you do when people aren't willing to read the textbook in the first place and then want to make changes to move things back to the old way of doing things? So throwing away the textbook before they've actually read it, I suppose. Is it there?
Yeah. So this is where I tend to disagree with a lot of the advice out there. A lot of the advice says if you implement only half of a framework, it all falls apart. I tend to believe that if you implement half of a framework, you might actually get half the value. So what if you introduced iterations and backlogs with no role changes? Well, you just introduced incremental delivery. And incremental delivery, arguably, is half the whole value proposition of an Agile conversation. So it's not about throwing away the baby with the bathwater. It's about being intentional about how much change can your team consume. You might be asking too much of them too soon. It might be too big of a change for them to embrace incremental delivery and empowered team members and cross-functional collaboration all in the same week. So be agile with your agile.
Yeah.
Be incremental as you introduce incremental delivery.
Thank you. We have a few more questions, but I'll try and get them wrapped up quickly. Hi, Jesse. This one's from Gregor. In your experience, what is a rough percentage of Agile transformation starting from the top? Personally, I haven't seen any. Most of the Agile lean efforts start in the messy middle. Maybe my data set's skewed, but assuming not, why do you think Agile transformation is usually not on top of the C-level agenda?
So there's a lot in there, and I'm going to focus on the last part.
Yeah, thank you.
The reason why Agile is not on the senior leadership team's agenda is because it's called something else. Almost always, Agile produces outcomes that align to a senior leader's initiatives and performance goals. One of them might be improving our brand experience. And if our brand experience is usually disrupted by poor quality, Agile methods directly relate to better quality. Another one might be we need to really improve our customer alignment. Well, Agile methods directly relate to customer alignment. So the challenge for us is not to get them to understand Agile, but for us to understand their goals. And then for us to translate agility into the language of their goals. We need to speak their language, not the other way around.
Brilliant. Yeah, that's a very good point there. Thank you. Yogesh has got one here as well. How is individualism versus collaborative team culture viewed in Agile?
That's a deep, deep topic, a deep question. What's the difference between personal empowerment and team empowerment? There's a whole discipline around this, but I want to leave you with one tip. Consensus does not mean unanimous. So one of the things you can take back to your teams is if you have not a majority, but maybe just a plurality of agreement, 4 out of 10 team members agree on this direction, and the other 6 team members, they're willing to tolerate it, that's enough. Consensus does not mean unanimous. It might be enough to have enough people with the passion to move in a certain direction and the other people willing just to go along for the ride.
Great stuff. Thank you very much. And there's one other question from Kershid here, which is what's the title of the HBR article you mentioned about the innovation matrix? Did you have that or after?
Yeah, I would just go ahead and Google it. Innovation Ambition Matrix. It's innovation ambition.
Innovation and Ambition Matrix. Thank you very much. Okay, guys, we're about 2 minutes over, but hopefully that was very useful for you guys there. Just a couple of little wrap-up things from me. We are an official Scrum user group, so you get 1 SCU for being part of this. It's a Scrum Alliance education unit. By all means, drop into the your Scrum Alliance dashboard and add the event to there, and you can get your SCUs there. Always helpful for your more advanced certifications and your re-ups. On top of that as well, we have another one of these running in September on the 23rd, which is a Wednesday. We have Joe Justice, came up with Extreme Manufacturing, currently working over at Tesla, and he's going to be talking about Agile with hardware. You can sign up for that talk at our meetup page. Will be a recording of this shared afterwards, probably shared tomorrow on our YouTube channel. I'll post it out to everybody on this call, but also post it out onto the wall in case anybody else would like to watch and listen to Jesse's brilliant talk tonight. I just want to say thank you so much for tonight, Jesse, and taking the time out from Washington to talk to us today. Cheers.
Yeah, so for more Q&A, just reach out. I'm available.
Great stuff. All right, thank you, everybody. Enjoy your evenings and your days. Take care now.